So if we're given a frequency table, a two-way frequency table, how do we read it? So here's an example. In a class of students, the following data table summarizes the gender of students and whether they have an A in the class. So maybe you're just given this information and you have to draw it into a frequency table. You actually have to draw the table, has an A, doesn't have an A, female, male, and decide like the columns. But this one's already given to us. So it's like, what's the probability that a student chosen randomly from the class does not have an A? So this one is not automatically filled out for us like the other ones were. So we just have to, fill out the totals. So we're going to total this here. So how many people have an A? Well, we have 7 females who have an A and 2 males who have an A. So there are 9 people total who have an A, and there are 14 people who do not have an A. Okay. And then let's figure out how many females. There were 18 females and there were 5 males. Now let's make sure that these add to the same numbers. So 9 plus 14 is 23. And 18 plus 5 is also 23. So it looks like we asked 23 people. Okay, so we asked 23 people and we found all of these things. So now the question is, what's the probability that a student chosen randomly from a class doesn't have an A? So we're going to be looking at the males and the females who don't have an A. So there are 14 of them total. And so that's our favorable outcomes. Our favorable outcomes is does not have an A, which is not a favorable outcome for you, but favorable outcome for this event. So 14 do not have an A. And what's our total number of outcomes? We have a total number of 23 people we could pick. If we pick one of them at random, there's a 14 and 23% or 14 and 23 chance that we are going to get somebody who doesn't have an A. So if in a class of students, here's data two-way frequency table that summarizes our data, how many people play an instrument and play a sport. So what's the probability that a student chosen randomly from the class plays neither a sport nor an instrument? So again, let's just figure out our totals. So how many people play a sport? Well, there's 3 plus 2, so there's 5 people total who play a sport, and there's 15 people who do not play a sport. There are 14 people who play an instrument, and there are 6 people who do not play an instrument. Let's make sure that these add up to the right amount. So 15 and 5 is 20, and 6 and 14 is 20. So we have 20 students total. And we're looking for what's the probability that a student chosen randomly from the class doesn't play a sport or an instrument. So that's only these people right here in this box, right? We're not looking at the total doesn't play an instrument, and we're not looking at the total doesn't play a sport. We're looking at only the people who don't do either, which is this 4. So that would be 4 out of 20, or 1/5 of the people do not play a sport. So if I picked someone randomly, I'd have a 1 in 5 chance of picking someone who didn't play a sport. What happens if we don't have all the information? Well, then we just fill it in, right? Okay, so right here, I know that 2 females have an A and a total of 5 people are female. So how many females can not have an A? Well, that would be 3, right? Because those have to add up to 5. And then I know that 17 people total have an A and 2 of them are female. So how many of them are male? Well, that would be 15 of them that are male, okay? And then I know that this adds up to 26. So what plus 17 equals 26? Well, that's going to have to be 9, right? This has to be 9. So that would add up to 26. And so if I have 9 people total who don't have an A and 3 of them are female, then that would make 6 of them male. And then I can just add those 2 together. So that would be 11. Not 11. Oh my gosh. 21. 21. And then if I add these together, I looked at they add 26 and they add a 26. So you could fill in this frequency table and then answer any questions from it based on that. So can I fill in this frequency table and answer the rest of the questions? So we have a 28 people. It gave us some information. 12 play an instrument, 13 play a sport. So plays an instrument would be 12. Plays a sport would be a total of 13, and we don't know what these 2 are, right? There are 10 students who don't play anything, who don't play a sport or an instrument. So we fill the rest of them in. Okay, so we know that they have to add up to 28, right? So this has to be 15 to add up to 28, which makes this 5. Which makes this 7, which makes this 7 to 13 is 6, which makes this 16. And then we just check to make sure that those add up to 28. Sure enough, if we add across, yep, that equals 28 and that equals 28. So then we can just fill it out. And what's the probability that a student chosen randomly from the class does not play an instrument? So does not play an instrument is this column. It's the 6 people who don't play an instrument but play a sport, and then it's the 10 people who don't play an instrument or a sport. So we add those two together and we get 16 total. So what is the probability that if I pick a student, they don't play an instrument? I would have 16 possible people that I could pick out of 28 people total.